All right, so today we are going deep on WRI, that Taiwanese organization doing some really interesting work in Madagascar. We've got two sources to dig into. One is a prayer letter from November 2024, and the other is a YouTube video showing some of their work. So we'll be looking at both of those to see how they're blending agriculture, cultural connections, and spiritual outreach. It's a pretty unique combination, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. What I find really striking is how WRI is going beyond just traditional aid models. It seems like they have a really deliberate strategy with three main areas of focus. They've got agricultural and livestock expertise, building connections with Austronesian people, and fostering cultural exchange.
Okay, so break that down for me a little bit. What's the thinking behind focusing on those three things specifically?
Well, you got to think about the challenges Madagascar is facing right now. Food security is a huge one. And then there's the question of cultural identity in this globalized world, not to mention the need for sustainable development. WRI seems to be tackling all of these, not separately, but in a way that connects them all together.
I see what you mean. So how does that actually play out in practice?
A great example is their agricultural training program. WNR sends agricultural experts over to Madagascar to train locals, and the goal is to help those locals become self-sufficient, both in farming and livestock management. They're not just handing out food, they're giving communities the tools to produce their own food. In the video, we see them teaching all sorts of techniques, like raising chickens and cultivating vanilla. These are high-value crops that could really boost the local economy.
Right, so it's not just about immediate needs, but also building long-term solutions for a stronger economy.
Absolutely. And then there's this whole other layer of connecting with the Austronesian communities in Madagascar. They're tracing their shared heritage with Taiwanese indigenous people. It's fascinating. They even met with the Mayor of Antananarivo to talk about leveraging those connections for both cultural and economic collaborations.
I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I never would have thought to connect Taiwan and Madagascar culturally.
It is pretty surprising, right? It really shows WIRI's deep understanding of the culture there. They're not just coming in with their own ideas. They're finding existing connections and building from there.
So it's less about us helping them and more about working together.
Exactly. And then you've got the cultural exchange programs, which adds another dimension to it all. They're actually planning to bring school principals from Madagascar to Taiwan so they can see how WIRI operates firsthand and potentially share best practices.
It's a two-way street. Now that November 2024 prayer letter gives us a look at some of what's going on behind the scenes. Pastor Lumaf went to the Lausanne 50 conference, which was all about global missions and spreading the gospel. What jumped out at you from that part of the letter?
Well, the letter itself doesn't give too much detail about the specific strategies they discussed. But when you connect it with what we see in the video, some interesting parallels start to emerge. For example, there's big emphasis on respecting local cultures when sharing one's faith. And we can see that in action when WIRI is interacting with the tribal kings of Madagascar. They're navigating this delicate balance between their own faith and the existing influence of Islam.
That's such an important point. It's not about forcing their beliefs on anyone. It's about finding ways to connect with the existing cultural and spiritual landscape.
Right. And there's also a focus on empowering local leaders, which was a recurring theme at the Lausanne conference. Think about WIRI's approach to agricultural training, or their plan to bring that Malagasy school principal to Taiwan. It's about building up local capacity from within, rather than just providing temporary aid.
They're putting those global mission strategies into practice on a local level.
Exactly. It makes me wonder how much of WIRI's success can be attributed to their participation in these global conversations and their willingness to adapt global strategies to a specific context like Madagascar.
That is a great question. It highlights the value of that cross-cultural learning and collaboration, even in the context of faith-based missions.
You got it. It's not just about spreading beliefs, it's about sharing knowledge and best practices and learning from each other's experiences.
The prayer letter also mentions a planned trip to Hong Kong for an evangelistic event, and it seems like that event is going to focus on minority groups. Networking and sharing their work with other organizations is definitely a priority for them.
And strategically, it makes perfect sense. By showcasing what they're doing in Madagascar to a wider audience, they can potentially attract more support and funding, and maybe even inspire other organizations to adopt similar approaches.
They're building a whole movement, not just running a single organization.
It's about amplifying their impact and creating a ripple effect that goes way beyond Madagascar.
Now, the prayer letter also talked about Pastor Lumaf's upcoming trip. He's headed to those remote southern regions of Madagascar in January 2025. It sounds like a pretty big undertaking.
It does, and the letter specifically asks for prayers for his safety and guidance, especially as he travels to those more remote and potentially dangerous areas. And they're not just being overly cautious. I mean, the video footage from their earlier trip that year Shows just how challenging it can be to travel in those regions.
Speaking of that video, are you ready to see what one guy is actually doing on the ground in Madagascar? Because this is where things get really interesting.
Let's do it. I'm really curious to see how those prayer requests actually play out in reality. Seeing them driving through the jungle there with an armed escort, I mean, wow. It really shows you just how real this work is. It's not just emails and donations. These folks are putting themselves out there in some pretty risky situations to make a difference.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical mission trip. Like you said, it really highlights the commitment and courage they have and the risks. It's not always just about physical danger either. Remember how the prayer letter mentioned the influence of Islam in those southern regions? Navigating that, I mean, it's got to be a challenge. You need a lot of sensitivity and understanding.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. It's this balancing act. Trying to be respectful of existing beliefs while still sharing your own faith.
How do you even begin to approach that? What does it look like in practice?
Well, we see it in how they interact with those 3 local tribal kings. Clearly, they've done their research. They understand the local power structures. And they know they need to engage with those leaders.
But it's got to be a delicate balance, right? Especially when you've got those different religious beliefs. There's potential for conflict.
For sure. But it's amazing to see how they handle it. You can sense their humility. They're listening more than they're talking. And they're trying to find common ground. Remember when they talked about Ubuntu, that idea of the interconnectedness of all humanity?
Right.
It resonated so strongly with the tribal kings, even though it comes from a different culture.
Yeah, it's like they're using those shared values to build a bridge instead of just pushing their religious agenda.
That's a great way to put it. And it looks like it's working. We see them praying together, sharing meals, having genuine conversations. It's so different from that stereotype of missionaries forcing their beliefs on people.
I also notice how they bring up that shared Austronesian heritage, between the Taiwanese indigenous people and some of the communities in Madagascar. That seems to be a key part of how they connect with people.
It's actually quite brilliant. Highlighting those shared roots creates this instant sense of kinship, and it opens a space for real dialogue. It's so much more effective than just coming in as outsiders. It's like they're saying, hey, we're not that different. We have a shared history here. Let's learn from each other.
I remember one of the tribal kings even talked about how moved he was to learn about those historical connections. It clearly had a big impact on him.
It fits perfectly with what we were talking about earlier, the effective mission strategies from that Lausanne conference. Finding common ground, building those bridges of understanding.
Well, it's not just about cultural exchange either. Sustainable development is clearly woven into everything they do.
Absolutely. It would be easy to just show up with a bunch of handouts. But they're focused on empowering communities to be self-sufficient. That agricultural training program is the perfect example. They're teaching them how to fish, not just giving them fish.
Right, and they're doing it while respecting local knowledge and practices. Remember how they were learning about those traditional Malagasy farming techniques? They were teaching modern methods, but also learning about the traditional ways.
Yeah, it's a two-way exchange of knowledge.
Exactly, and that's so crucial. It goes back to that idea of partnership and collaboration. WIRI isn't coming in with all the answers. They're working with communities, listening to their needs, and giving them the tools to take control of their own development.
And that sense of ownership, of feeling empowered, that's what really makes the difference. It's not about creating dependency. It's about giving people the agency to build a better future for themselves, their families.
It's like that old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly. But WIRI's going even further. They're not just teaching them to fish. They're teaching them how to build a whole sustainable industry, how to market their products, manage resources. It's a holistic approach.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, when you think about all the problems in the world. But seeing what WIRI is doing, it gives me hope. It shows you that even small organizations can have a real impact when they work with this kind of sensitivity, respect, and commitment to partnership.
It's true. It reminds you that change doesn't happen overnight. It's about those small steps, building relationships, and finding solutions that last, and recognizing that often the best solutions come from the communities themselves.
That story about the school principal they want to bring to Taiwan, it's such a great example of the ripple effect they're creating. It's not just about impacting communities, it's about impacting people and creating the connections that bridge cultures, even continents.
Right. Think about the insights that principal will bring back to Madagascar and how that knowledge will benefit their school and community. They're investing in human capital, which is the most valuable kind of investment.
And think about the connections they'll make in Taiwan. It's a human link between these two cultures, creating understanding, empathy.
It really embodies WRI's whole approach, building relationships, sharing knowledge, making the world a more connected place.
So we've seen how WIRI is addressing those practical needs, fostering cultural exchange, making those spiritual connections. But there's another side to their work we haven't talked about yet, advocacy.
Right, they're not just working on the ground, they're raising awareness about the challenges Madagascar faces, advocating for more support, more understanding, like they're giving a voice to those who don't have one.
Yeah, the prayer letter mentioned those Kachin refugees. They're not directly working with them in Madagascar, but they're using their platform to shine a light on their situation and call for action. They're using their network and credibility to bring attention to issues that might otherwise be ignored.
Exactly. It's part of their broader mission of service, this commitment to speaking up for those who are overlooked and marginalized. They understand their work goes beyond any one country or community.
And that advocacy is so important. It helps people understand these complex global issues and encourages them to get involved. It's about creating a sense of shared responsibility, working together to make the world a more just and equitable place.
Absolutely. It's about amplifying the voices of those who are often silenced, challenging apathy, complacency, calling people to action, recognizing that we're all interconnected, and that what happens in one community affects us all.
You know, it really strikes me that WIRI's approach is all about relationships, building those relationships with local communities, with government officials, with other organizations, with supporters all around the world. They're creating this network of support and solidarity that extends far beyond Madagascar.
It's like a web, a web of interconnectedness. And it's through those relationships that they're making such a big impact. It's not just about doing good work. It's about doing it in a way that's collaborative, sustainable, and rooted in human connection. Recognizing that we're all part of something bigger, and that our actions, even the small ones, can make a difference.
That's something we can all take to heart, whether we're working on a global scale or right here in our own communities. The power of relationships, you can't deny it.
It's about building bridges, understanding each other, working together for a better world. It's about moving beyond just stupidity. It's about solidarity.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, the challenges WRI faces. Because it's not always easy, right?
No, it's important to acknowledge that. This work comes with risks, setbacks, limitations.
We talked about the security risks, the cultural complexities, the logistics of working in such remote areas. But then there's also the challenge of funding. Remember they mentioned needing help to repair their 8 blessing space after those typhoons?
Yeah, that's a constant struggle for so many nonprofits, especially those working in difficult environments. They rely so much on donations and grants, and that funding can be unpredictable.
It really highlights the need for consistent support. It's not enough to just make a one-time donation. Organizations like WIRI need that ongoing support to keep operating, to adapt, to keep making a difference.
It's about investing in their long-term vision, recognizing that real change takes time, resources, and a commitment to sticking with it, even when things get tough.
So as we head into the last part of our deep dive, let's keep those challenges in mind, but also that incredible resilience WIRI shows, because despite all of that, they keep going, they keep innovating, they keep making a difference.
It's a testament to their dedication, their passion, and their unwavering belief in the power of human connection to make the world better.
You know, it's incredible how they manage to keep their eyes on the big picture, those long-term goals, while still addressing those day-to-day needs on the ground, like it's 3D chess or something.
Oh yeah, they're definitely adaptable. That's one of their biggest strengths. They're not afraid to change plans, try new things, partner up with others to get things done. It's not about ego or being stuck in their ways. It's about doing what works best for the people they're serving.
Yeah, it's that willingness to learn and grow that I find so impressive. They don't pretend to have all the answers. They're always looking for new information, new partnerships, new ways to do better.
Remember that story in the prayer letter? The one about the typhoon? They hit their office in Taiwan?
Oh, yeah, the flooding.
They could have easily freaked out, right? But Pastor Lumaf just starts cleaning up.
I know, it's just a small story. But it says so much about who they are. They don't let setbacks stop them. They see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, to get creative and find solutions.
Right. It's like they've got this can-do attitude. It's contagious, honestly. It makes you want to cheer them on, support them. It makes you believe that positive change is possible, even when things seem really tough.
They turn those obstacles into opportunities. And it's not just about being positive. It's about taking action, doing something.
Exactly. They don't just sit around complaining. They focus on solutions.
It's really inspiring.
It shows you what people can do when they decide to take charge.
Now, we can't talk about IRA without talking about their faith. It's clearly a huge part of what drives them. They see their mission as an extension of their belief in love and compassion, and how those things can transform lives.
Absolutely. Their faith is what keeps them going, especially when they face those challenges. It's not just about result. It's about living out their values, making a difference in the world, one person, one community at a time.
What I find so inspiring is that they're not just talking about their faith, they're living it out. You can see it in their actions.
It's not about preaching, it's about doing.
It's a perfect example of faith without works is dead.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
You know, it's a powerful example for all of us, no matter what our personal beliefs are. When we add on our values, we can make a real difference.
We all have something to offer. Gifts, talents, something we can use to make the world a better place.
Oh, as we wrap up this deep dive into WIRI's work in Madagascar, I'm left feeling really inspired. They've shown us that even a small organization can have a huge impact when they approach their work with humility, cultural sensitivity, and that deep commitment to partnership.
It's true, they've challenged us to rethink the role of faith in development. And they've shown us how powerful it can be when it's paired with action, compassion, and a genuine desire to empower others.
They've also reminded us that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit is incredibly resilient and creative.
What really stands out to you from all of this?
For me, it's the power of human connection. WIRI's success isn't just about programs or strategies. It's about the relationships they build with people, communities, even across different cultures.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're all connected, and that the solutions to the world's biggest problems lie in our ability to work together, learn from each other, and build bridges of understanding.
So what now? What can we take away from WIRI's story and apply to our own lives, our own communities, our own work? How can we be a part of building a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world?
That's the question, isn't it? It's a question we each have to answer for ourselves. But maybe WIRI's story can be our guide, a source of inspiration, a reminder that even small acts of kindness, courage, collaboration can make a real difference.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to Madagascar. We hope you've been as inspired by WIRI's work as we have. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.